Oh, okay. Thank you very much. It was very interesting in pointing to different opportunities. So our last speaker needs no introduction, Professor Wei Zhang from Princeton. So please go ahead.
Can I share my screen? Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, great. So I guess I have 5 more minutes. So I wrote a chapter, book chapter on China's it's a real estate market a few years back. So I know I'm the last one, so I won't get too much, go over the detail of the paper. So I think sort of let me just quickly discuss the big picture issue here. I think the last three commentators all talked about sort of the imbalances of the real estate market, which is what's the fascinating issue and actually the pressing issue at the moment, right? Um, of course, real estate is a key contributor to the national GDP in China, 25%, 26%. This is the number being highlighted. And of course, real estate, housing holdings are just like a stock holding to Americans in China, right? So this is the largest item on households' balance sheet. Um, and partly because of lack of a savings vehicle, but partly also because of certain expectation, right? Personally, actually, coming from China on two homes actually in my hometown, which is second tier city, not the third tier, but one of them my parents are living in, the other actually have been empty for 10 years now. Financially have been doing pretty well, I have to say, but perhaps I should consider sell it soon. But the reason I think sort of which I convinced myself to buy these homes some years ago is because actually local governments are actually heavily behind the real estate market in China, right? So they are the monopoly in the land market, which ultimately drive the market. And also, that's also why actually there's so much confidence, at least early on, right? And expectations about the housing prices. And of course, real estate assets are heavily used as collateral to raise debt financing for local government and so on. So this, I think, is the key issue. Joe mentioned the supply. Yeah, it's there. It's clearly too much. But the question is, where's the demand? I think the demand is because there is this expectation among households, right? Because government are behind these homes, behind the land sales, and they have to rely on land sales so much. To talk about, I'm going to jump a lot of things. Really, this is the land-based fiscal policy for local governments, which happened since the fiscal reform in 1994, right? Which took away a lot of the tax revenue from local government. So you can see here, there's a sharp drop in tax revenue to local government, but at the same time, the spending actually stayed the same, right? So how to cover this shortfall, right? So this is the land sales, right? Since the formation of the republic, there was a nationalization of all land, right? Land is owned in principle by the state, and local government actually controls sale of this land, right? And use the land to cover the shortfall in the fiscal revenue. In particular, a 30th city are particularly exposed to this. And that's why sort of there have been so much excessive in the 30th city, which is a very important, a very sharp question at the moment. But at the same time, it's important to recognize actually land sales actually has, as a mechanism design, right, had actually a lot of advantages and good things early on, right? Land sales basically allow local government to quickly raise capital to fund the infrastructure and the capital projects. Yunfan actually mentioned that actually 30 city need to actually build a lot of infrastructure, right? 88% of the roads, 92% of new road construction, and 84% of expressways and so on. To fund those infrastructure, which is nice, you need where's the money, right? So really, all things to use taxes, right? But before actually infrastructure is there, before economy is really there, tax revenue actually gonna only very, very gradually come in, right? It's just too slow. right? By buying a piece of land actually from underdeveloped cities, like buying the growth stock, as Joe actually, the metaphor Joe mentioned early on, right? So the buyer gets to the right to use land for a long period, right? So 30 years for industrial land and 70 years for residential land. The land valuation depends on expectation of city's development during the entire period, right? And beyond, actually. So by selling the land, the local government sells a claim on the future growth of the city. So for that reason, actually, force local government to sell land and thus have to design the city's infrastructure and development plan actually has advantage, and also force local governments to stick with the plan, right? Because they have to come back to sell more land in the future years. So that's why early on, this scheme actually has its advantages. But at the same time, might one argue that at this point, right, beyond certain point, this also creates a lot of excessive incentive, right? For particular aggressive cities might have this natural impulse to sell a lot more than necessary, right? And also maybe even work with real estate companies to actually to boost the local real estate prices, right? So and all of that is potentially so the downside. And at the moment, right, 30% excessive supply at this point is really a worry. But at the same time, I think sort of to really to reform this, all the previous commentators all mentioned, right, there's a need. But to really to resolve this issue, the ultimate problem actually is the fiscal reform, right? How do you address sort of the local government's fiscal budget? This is a key concern, right? With COVID in place and actually local government again at the front run of enforcing many of these policies, right? And that require budget. And the budget again, where does it come from? I think this is ultimately the issue, right? I'm not going to get into this. And in fact, if you look at the sort of, this is outdated number, but nevertheless, actually banks are heavily exposed to real estate related, right? So mortgage loans are actually the safer ones, but property loans, the loans made to property developers, as well as actually loans made to local government using land and real estate property as collateral. So in total, actually, Chinese banks actually had 25% of their assets actually exposed to real estate, right? A large fraction of them because of exposure to developer and to local government. At the moment, actually, because of the heavy exposure of local government on the stake, I think sort of this is a sector too big to fail in China, right? So the central government clearly cannot let this to fail in any case. So that's for that reason. So that whatever problem we had, I know I'm out of time. So the issue, so that before that, central government had to find a way to address it, right? So to coordinate to get banks to provide more funding and so on. But clearly, this is not the long-term solution. So let me just end here. So real estate market is a really important part. I think this paper is really nice, highlighting the especially pressing issue for the third-tier cities. However, different from many other countries, the real estate really is deeply connected to the government system, which ultimately determine the supply and as well as market's expectation about the whole thing, right? So I think sort of this is very different from Western country, right, where supply is determined by landscape and other physical constraints. Here in China, it's determined by local government's fiscal budget. Okay, let me end here. Sorry to take 2 more minutes.
No, it's great.